Hello, Dojo developers. This is Chrono Developer Relations, and I have the great pleasure to be sitting here with Loothero, one of the creative forces behind the new Loot Survivor 2, one of the hottest games on Starknet. Loot Survivor 2 came out less than 1 month ago and has already been taking up almost 1/3 of all Starknet transactions. So we think that this is a huge step forward for on-chain gaming and really an incredible achievement technically, game-wise, and really all across the board. So here with Loot Hero to talk a little bit more about the Beast NFT, a core part of the Loot Survivor universe, and all of the engineering work that went into making that collection possible. So Loot Hero, can you tell me a bit about the origins of the Beast collection, from the original Loot NFT through to the first Beast collection up to the new V?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. The Beast originated in the original Loot Survivor dungeon, which was launched on Starknet mainnet in November 2023. So they were always been present in Loot Survivor. Have existed as long as Loot Survivor has existed, and they were a collaboration with Loot Survivor and the Lead Skulls team, which is one of the most prolific pixel artists, unchained pixel artist groups in crypto. I would encourage anybody to look into the Lead Skulls team. They have artwork across nearly every major network on crypto. They've been building nonstop for years, and I'm an honorary member of their team. So when I let them know that I was going to be building this game on Starknet, they thought, well, it would be sweet if we had some collectibles, some collectible pixel art in there, and they could be Beast and all of this. And we jammed on it for a bit, and they started doing what they do, which is producing amazing pixel art. And we tokenized the pixel art. We put it inside the dungeon. We created the issuance system and kind of the tokenomics for the Beast, where the goal was to have ample supply to be used for games that people could collect these beasts and then eventually battle them and have lots of fun, but then ample scarcity for collectible value. So we ended up at 43 of each of the 75 beasts, which is a supply of around 93,000. And they're first come, first serve. So each of the beasts at level 19 gets a special name. And if you're the first one to defeat it, then you get to collect it. And so if I collect the Blood Shadow Jaguar, I get it. And then later on, if you discover it, you can still defeat it. It can defeat you, but in no case can you collect it because I now own it. That's how they originally appeared in Loot Survivor 1. There was really no promises of future utility. It was just these fun pixel art creatures that you could collect. And yeah, I guess I'll pause there because that's the origin. I mean, we can talk more about what they've evolved into now years later, but that's the origin story of the Beast and them appearing on Starknet.
Yeah, I guess maybe some clarifying questions. So it sounds like the pixel art aspect was actually really core to the initial motivation for the collection. It wasn't like you had this sort of collectible and you needed like a visual. It sounds like the lead skull sort of art was really core the whole time. I'm also kind of curious, like as someone I've collected a fair number of beasts at this point, like how did you decide on the 75 beasts? How did you decide on the like the certain amount, 1,200 or so per beast? Were these choices that were made arbitrarily? Were they part of the game design? I know that, Loot Survivor uses a rock, paper, scissors type of combat. So, 75 is three groups of 25, but kind of what were some of the reasons why these choices were made the way that they were?
Yeah, exactly. I think you've figured out most of it, but I'll layer in the additional context here, which is that so there are three types in loot. There's magic, hunters, and brutes, and that lines up with the three types of equipment that the loot contract lays out: metal, hide, cloth. And so we knew that the beast would correlate with those, that there would be also, when you're fighting these beasts, that they would have a type, same thing with obstacles. So we kind of knew that the obstacles and beast system would generally adhere to that same rock, paper, scissors system where you could always have certain armor to protect you against certain beasts. And that would be the core game mechanics. So we knew we needed at least 25 would be the minimum that we could have done, because the other thing loot does is it lays out 5 tiers. Or sorry, there could be 15 at minimum was the minimum we could have done. And that would be effectively one tier 1 magical beast. We could have one tier 2 magical beast. So you could have these 5 magics, these 5 hunters, and these 5 brutes. So we could have gone as low as 15 for obstacles and beasts. But we looked at that and we said, oh, that's not really enough. Like, when you started playing the game, you just like come across the warlock and you come across the warlock. It felt too redundant. So we thought, well, what would be better is like 2. And so I think actually in the original Loot Survivor 1, I think there was maybe only 2 T1s, maybe 3 in the very early days. And then with some contract optimizations and other things, because all of these things have implications on the technical side. You can't just like, oh, we want 1,000 beasts. There's storage costs, there's gas costs to consider. So we, ultimately continued to like push forward and got to a position where we thought, oh, well, we can do 75. It's a lot of pixel art. I mean, this is hand drawn pixel art. So pixel, 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 pixel to draw all of these. And then
Hmm.
as we move into like Loot Survivor 2 with the animations, it's not just one pixel art per thing, but multiple frames across each one. So, I mean, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of pixels that need to be placed. But the Elite Skulls team was totally into it. They love laying pixels. They love painting pixels. So they were like, we're down. The contract team, like the Loot Survivor devs were like, we're down to have more. And the players ultimately wanted more because it just makes the game feel more fun. At 75, you really notice it with the animations of the new one that like you run into stuff that you've never seen before. Even if you've been playing for weeks and weeks, you come across stuff, you're like, wow, I've never seen this one before. And we just felt like that was really the right number. So to recap that, yeah, it ultimately is a rock, paper, style system plus 5 tiers. So you're going to have multiples of 15. And then the question is, okay, how much pixel art can we create? How much contract storage can we afford? And yeah, and then like how much variety makes for a game which doesn't feel redundant and you continue to see new stuff. Yeah, everything led to 75. And so those are the 75 original beasts.
Right. I kind of have two follow-up questions now. One is more on the lore side, one's more on the engineering side. As far as the lore goes, how did you decide on this 75? I think as anyone who's played the game will know, playing Loot Survivor 2 is kind of like a world tour of different, folk cultures and mythologies. You've got, Kappas, Japanese water demons. You've got warlocks and vampires. These are like European sort of villains and threats. You've got Pegasus and Pegasi. So you're really going. It's really a kind of a world tour. What was it like to kind of decide on this list of 75 from like the global canon of monsters?
Yeah, that was exactly it. What I did is I did exactly that. I looked around and I found mythical creatures from all over the world, and then using early AI that we had at the time to help synthesize all of that and effectively give me a set of creatures which were reasonably fit into these categories, but then also were spread across the entire world. And I really tried to make it pretty uniform in picking creatures from all of these different cultures and appearing them all together in this game. So yeah, I'm glad you noticed that. Others have noticed that as well. And yeah, that was the intent, is to really feature all of these mythical creatures from all over the world.
Were there any creatures that didn't make it? Were there any kind of difficult decisions in development where you're like, this monster just isn't monstrous. It's just not monstrous enough.
Yes,
You
I
don't get to be
know.
a part of this.
Lots of those. I mean, especially with like Greek mythology, you just have tons and tons of monsters to choose from.
Yeah.
Limiting that down to a few is quite challenging, whereas other cultures maybe don't have as many. So it's like, oh, okay, well, like if I'm looking at the full list of all of them, and there's only like 6 really prominent ones, then it's a little bit easier to take from there. Whereas if you have these cultures which just have, for one reason or another, produce a lot of mythical creatures, then you do have to be like, okay, I gotta pick. Yeah, I just did my best, to pick the ones that I thought the players would like, ones that would generate good pixel art, and just kind of like get a good vibe.
That makes sense. So kind of heading over to the engineering question, I think a question I ask myself is, are we going to keep releasing more beasts? Is it going to be like a season thing where every few months there's like a new crop of beasts, or is it kind of like this is the max because of technical constraints? You mentioned that adding beasts has implications for contract storage, maybe for computation. Can you tell us a bit more about specifically what that means? Is it kind of like a one-time deployment cost? Just deploy more? Is it ongoing cost for the collection just because more beasts leads to more computation in an ongoing way? What are some of the kind of technical challenges and costs and trade-offs that you ran into when you were building out this collection?
In general, we don't mind paying one-time costs. So, like the beasts were extraordinarily expensive. I mean, relatively by Starknet standards to deploy because of how much is in them. I mean, it's 5 contracts because it all couldn't fit in one. So it overflowed the size of a contract such that we needed 5 entire contracts to deliver the beast onto Starknet. Even the font is fully on chain. So we put the entire font, which oftentimes is like kilobytes, sometimes low megabytes worth of data to get it on. Now you have to do some optimizations on the character sets in order to make that work. In general, if it's a one-time cost, we're happy to pay it all the time. Where we don't sign up for that is when it's ongoing gas costs to the community, because that's leakage from the community. So fortunately with the beast, somewhere in the last year, we've achieved through new innovations, we've unlocked the ability to technically support an almost unlimited amount of beasts with no increase to gas cost. It's a fairly new innovation on our side that we haven't really tapped into yet because we don't need to. But in general, we do expect the system to support an almost unbound number of beasts long term. Now, I think the question, though, is as much technical as it is economic, right? And when you're dealing with live tokens, you're dealing with live markets often, not because the founders wish that, but because if you give people actual ownership of things, actual ownership means that they can do whatever they want. They can trade them, they can buy them, they can sell them. And you have open marketplaces where people conduct in those trades. So I think as a Web3 builder, you have to be very sensitive to that. And you can't just do things like, yeah, maybe we'll just like launch some new beast or something because that has an impact. So for now, we're not considering that. Like we have these 75 beasts. Loot Survivor 2 has a very well thought out issuance policy where those beasts will continue to be collectible for an extended amount of time. You know, the issue would be had it not been so meticulously designed, you might imagine in the, almost 50,000 games that have been played already, that it's like all the beasts are collected. And then it's like, what next? Fortunately, the way that the system's designed and the supply of the beast, the difficulty of the dungeon, and then the ongoing scarcity of the beast where they become harder to collect, we kind of have a pretty good estimate of how many games it's going to take to collect them. Meanwhile, the ticketing system is issuing a fixed amount every day. So we know that you can't play more than this amount per day. So we have good assurances on the beasts are going to be collectible for a fairly long period of time. So we can kind of just focus on those. But like looking into the far future, technically, there is now opportunity for the game contracts through these innovations to support a nearly unlimited amount of beast. And what I'll say with that, again, being mindful of like the economics and that is like the beasts will always be the original inhabitants of Death Mountain. They're in Death Mountain Dungeon Zero, like their lore is solidified. The amount of time and work that's gone into those from a pixel art to an NFT design, like the whole thing is just extraordinary. And I'm confident that that'll be appreciated today, tomorrow, and almost forever. Like even future AI systems can really look at that and say, wow, this was like an incredible amount of effort to create these. But as we think about these roguelike on-chain dungeon experiences, it is fun to have like large numbers of things you could come into contact, and even for those things to be just in time. It's separate from collectibles though, right? Not everything in Death Mountain has to be collectible. You can just come across different things in it. And so, Death Mountain, separate from Loot Survivor, its ability to support an unbound number of obstacles and beasts, again, separate from collectibles, is quite interesting and powerful in creating these like just-in-time generative experiences where like there's almost like because it's unbound, it can be just in time and no one knows what you're going to come across, right? And so yeah, I'll just cap it off by saying that initially there was some technical constraints. We've since pretty much fully eliminated those, so it is unbound. But in the context of collectibles and that lore, Provable Labs is very much just focused on the beast and growing the culture and the lore and the fun around the beast.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've been really struck by, your team is how well you're able to hold all of these different ins and outs and knobs and layers and interactions in your heads kind of all at the same time. I think, as I've come to appreciate the design of Loot Survivor 2 and the beasts and really every layer, every economic layer that you've introduced to kind of balance out potential failures or exploits and to kind of, protect and create and sort of imbue these assets with meaning and value in a very, I think, deep and not superficial way. It's been very impressive. I'm sort of curious. I mean, I think I would like to go a little bit deeper into the technical sort of unlock that you just alluded to. Just I think our audience would be interested in knowing a bit more of the kind of like the ins and outs of implementing the collection. Would you be willing to tell us a little bit more about the specifics of this unlock that you did around the beast scaling? I think you'll just be curious for people to know more about it.
Yeah, ultimately what it comes down to is that the beast that you're battling is never actually stored on chain. So when you come across the beast in Loot Survivor, then you see the beast page and you're in a battle with a warlock and it has a name, it has health, all of this. The thing is that beast is actually generated at runtime within within the execution thread. So when you call attack, right, you call attack on the contract with your adventure ID. And the first thing that the contract does is it takes your adventure out of storage. It loads your adventure state. And then it's really your adventure state, which is generating the beast. particularly persistent elements of your adventure state. So, like, it couldn't use your health because your health is changing. So, if it was using your health to generate the beast would change every time you took damage. So, it's using persistent things that on your adventure that wouldn't change. So, say just like something simple like your XP is going to stay the same. So, if it can take your XP and like your adventure ID and then initial sources of randomness when you discover the beast, which are otherwise fixed, it can then generate that beast in memory when you called attack. It was never actually stored. And it's a technique that we use actually in other parts of code as well now quite regularly, where if you think hard about it, then you can kind of, in a lot of cases, do this. It is one of those things that like, you have to really think deeply about this stuff to get to this point where you realize, wait a second, we don't need, and once you unlock it, you eliminate a lot of storage, and storage continues to be one of the most, expensive things on these blockchains, especially when you're running on like a validity proof like Starknet, which has generally cheap computation. So yeah, that's fundamentally it. Is that because we're not actually storing the beast, we're just mapping it to something. We're just generating it in memory. If the ID was say 10,000, that's fine for the ID to be 10,000 because it's just a static lookup table at a certain point. Whereas say it's like your health, we have to bind your health. We bind the health to like a certain amount of bits, like 1024, maybe it's 2056 in the current version. But you can only have so much health as an adventurer because we have to store that, and therefore we only have so many bits of storage. Because we're generating the beast, we're never storing that ID. We can technically have a million beast IDs. There's another section to this on the other side that I think is like maybe too deep to get into, but I think for most people that are technical, I think that's enough. Like they'll see this and realize, oh, okay. So like the thing is like really, if there's something like an encounter where you're going to battle something, perhaps what you could use is the initial entropy state when you discovered that thing as effectively the storage. So it's almost like the beast details are being stored as part of the adventure. Which is ultimately how we're doing it. The only part of the beast that's stored on the adventure actually is the health. So the beast health is still capped at 1023 because that part has to be persistent. We can generate the fact that it's a Blood Shadow Warlock, T1, all of this, but the actual health it has to persist. So the only bits of storage that are actually included on the adventure, which is a single storage slot, is just, I don't know, 8 bits or something small, maybe slightly more on the adventure story. It is just the health. So that when you attack again, you have the persistent health.
Right.
But the details of the beast are just generated in memory at runtime when you call attack. They're never actually stored.
Right. So just to check my understanding, it sounds like, what we don't want is to have to actually store an entire beast on chain just for an encounter in which the adventurer might lose, because then you're just writing all these beasts to state that are not going to ever go anywhere. You don't want to write the beast to the chain until it's been captured, and then it becomes a collectible. And so what you've done is basically use the adventurer state as a kind of seed for a pseudo-random beast generator. And then you can generate a beast encounter without actually writing the entire beast to state. Is that a fair summary of what you just said?
Yeah, very, very close. There's a little bit of collision with the collectibles and the game itself, which is like, I think it's accurate enough, but not perfectly accurate. The other framing would just be that, like, if you had, say, 255 beast IDs, well, then you know that you could represent that in 8 bits, right? And so if like the normal way that you would, like the way that we initially did this is that when you came across the beast, the adventurer would have like a beast ID on it. And if it was 0, you're not in battle. If the beast ID is 1, then you're fighting a warlock. And then you'd also have the beast health. So when you call attack, is beast ID not greater than, is it greater than 0? Okay, you're in a battle. What are you battling? ID 1, which is a warlock. So if with that system, you can have 255 with 8 bits of storage, and Loot Survivor in general runs on 251 bits for most of the game. So we're very precise about our bits. So 8 bits is a lot to us. And if we wanted to go more beast, then we would need more bits on the adventure. So we could go 9 bits, and then we could have 511 IDs, right? We could keep going. But with this, we just delete that. We say we don't even need to store the beast ID at all. All we need is the beast health. And then we can just generate the ID. So everything else you said, completely accurate. And it's just really about, if you have some kind of bounded set of IDs, you naturally need a certain amount of bits to express that. And if you're going to store it on the adventure, then you need the adventure to reserve that number of bits. Doing it just in time in memory just means that you don't need to store anything. So if you have a million beast definitions, it's really just a static lookup table. And what it also means is that they can be added over time. The same is true for a lot of our systems now. So like items, for example, in the follow-up Death Mountain, items, you can add more items to the game. Anybody can add more beasts to the game. Anybody can add anything else they want to the game. Now, not to beast mode. Loot Survivor 2 beast mode is a particular settings which specifies the beast. It specifies everything about that dungeon, what's inside, what the items are. But this new, our next version, Death Mountain, lays out the framework so that anybody can add as many beast obstacles, items as they want. And when you create a new game, when you create a new dungeon, you kind of just set which of those are going to be part of it. But the result is effectively a Death Mountain that can have an unlimited amount of beasts, an unlimited amount of obstacles, an unlimited amount of items without any increase to gas, like really at all. Like it's completely bounded. So I know that goes like pretty far into the future, but I hope at least people followed most of that along the way and maybe some all the way to the end. It's certainly insanely exciting as we move into like the world of agent created content and like these agent quest masters that can create these dungeons just in time and throw you in. And they've just created these new items and beasts. And, I mean, it's going to be very much unhinged and unbounded as we look to the future. And we're excited about that.
That's really cool. I mean, I don't think I'd appreciate really how kind of precise the bit packing was with the implementation of this game. It sounds like you really spent a lot of time really making every single bit count versus just, throwing a bunch of storage on chain and saying, YOLO. So that's, I think, very impressive to your credit.
Yeah, if you open up the box, I mean, it's pretty amazing. You can see the adventure felt. So it's a 251-bit field element, and the whole game, most of it. The only other storage is really the bag. So you have one storage slot, 251 bits for the bag, and one storage slot, 251 bits for the adventure. There's just two I don't know, entries in a database, or like the minimum box. If you're going to ship something with USPS or UPS or wherever you are in the world, your mail service, you have this box and you pay per box. That's how storage works. And really, for the most part, it's just a single box for the whole game. So all of the experience of Loot Survivor is just the very precise manipulation of 251 bits. And you can actually even watch that single 251 bits. You can look at it and watch somebody's game live just through these bits, kind of just changing. It's like, oh, they just upgraded this stat, but it's just the whole thing. That's the raw view, is 251 bits being carefully manipulated. And, the rules around how these bits can change, right? You can't all of a sudden just go from 1 strength to 50 strength. Right? So there's rules around how these bits can be changed, but it is quite special. I mean, part of me, I really like living in the world of AI because it's much easier for AI to appreciate these things. If you send the contracts to a frontier model, they will immediately recognize this. And they're like, wow, what did you guys do here? And they'll totally like glow about it, right? Even without any kind of bias, even if you try to like make them FUD it, essentially, like the bit packing, it's just like, it almost can't. They're like, man, the whole game is in 251 bits. This is like extraordinary level of like attention to detail. And so, yeah, we did, because, Loot Survivor 1 came out when an ERC20 transfer on Starknet was 30 cents. So if it takes 30 cents in gas to send a token, which is like a very simple transaction, how are you going to build a game where you need people to be able to play for 5-20 minutes and do lots of things, right? That game's going to cost an extraordinary amount of money. So we kind of had to do this. And even though a lot of builders, we saw a phase, I think, like a year or two ago, where like there was definitely a culture in on-chain gaming that was like, just pretend gas doesn't matter and just build fun games. I can appreciate the sentiment there, but also there's actual technical constraints to the media that we're working with. And so it just feels like you do have to understand that and appreciate it. And if you build a game where every button click costs $5, you're responsible for delivering $5 plus in value for every button click in your game. And that's where on-chain gaming is a scam, because you can't do it. I'm sorry, but you can't make a game where clicking this button is worth $5 sustainably over time. And yeah, that's where even in the early days, the button click was about 30 cents. Slightly less. We were able to actually beat an ERC20 transfer for Loot Survivor, which was remarkable. I mean, think about Loot Survivor doing an upgrade, buying potions, buying items, doing all of these things, and that transaction is cheaper than an ERC20 transfer. And we were able to do that, and it was able to make Loot Survivor run on mainnet at a time when no one else could because of gas costs. And then we just continued to lean into that. And now, we're like sub-cent, 1 cent or less. We can, our best form is 1/5 of a cent that we've seen a single transaction. And yeah, I think 1/5 of a cent starts to feel like, okay, I think Loot Survivor can provide enough fun to justify 1/5 of a cent. I mean, even better to be cheaper, but that's where you really start into getting into a game that could the economics make sense all of a sudden. Again, $5 a button click, never going to work. I knew it was never going to work. That's why we never really leaned into like financial speculation, hype, all of these things. The community is going to go bankrupt off of uh, just the gas fees. And the very last part I'll say here, because I do think it's just so important. I think the whole on-chain gaming community needs to learn and it needs to gain wisdom from past mistakes. And the other long tail of these decisions that were made is a group that then did this thing where they said, you know what we're going to do to defeat gas? We're going to launch our own app chain and it's going to be super cheap and fast. And that's how we'll defeat gas. I'll mention Pirate Nation here just because it's a good example, but like I'm very sensitive of just in general, that community, like, they built for years. Like, I think anyone who's building in the space, I have an immense amount of respect for. But it's certainly just a good example because there's facts now available that the team has produced that we can just like look at and say, like, okay, but like there are some hidden costs here. And in that case, you have this chain that's fast and cheap, and all of a sudden gas doesn't matter. But then, like, now the reason that we're seeing Pirate Nation wind down and effectively disappear is because it was costing them hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to operate that network. So it wasn't free, right? The gas wasn't cheap. It was just being subsidized on the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. So if you look at something like Starknet now, how many Loot Survivor games could you fund with $300,000? A lot of Loot Survivor games, It's like much better value to just do a $300,000 gas subsidy for Starknet. Like that would just cover Loot Survivor games. I think I did the math and it was like, I don't know, it was like 1,000,000 games or something. It's so many games. Yeah, I'll just cap there. I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but I just do think it's important for us to like, the people that are dunking on-chain gaming, they're at least 80% correct. Like 80% of what they're saying is correct. And I think that the 20%, like the small portion of us still building, we need to see what they're saying and say, like, you guys are right. This, like, we did fail you in these regards. We did hide certain costs. We did pretend things didn't matter when they actually did. And then we need to learn and grow from that. And I do think that Loot Survivor is an example where we were very disciplined and principled about how we were building. And the result is a long-standing community that survived for years without being depleted economically because we weren't sinking all of our money into these hidden costs and gas and all of these things. And we can afford for things to be like the beast cost $1 or $5. Like, that's great. That's fun. We don't need everything to be super expensive and overhyped.
I think that's totally incredible. I think that, the focus on fundamentals is, in my mind, generally the right approach. And I think to your point, very often lacking. There's a joke that my dad would make that I've been making more and more, which is, you talk to a business person who says, we lose money on every sale, but we make it up on volume, which I always thought was pretty funny.
That's so funny. Yeah,
Yeah,
that
that's
is
a good
just like spot on. It's like, wow.
Yeah, so that one I've been really keeping that one in my pocket. What was I going to ask? Yeah, so I guess I'm sort of curious. Like, can you give us a window into your team's thought process? Because it seems like you've all been able to be pretty sharp about the economics of your products. Is that something that you're just intuitively good at? Is it something that you've all done before? Like, I feel like a lot of teams really have a hard time wrapping their heads around it, but it seems like you all have done a pretty great job with it. Like, how does that, behind the scenes, how's that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I have an insanely good team. Like, it's pretty much every single day, or at least 3 times a week when I meet with the team and we give our updates and like they just distracted dev await. They're just nonstop putting out so much good stuff. And I can be a difficult founder leader to work with, because I do generally, I'm thinking all of the time and generally very reactive to what's happening, seeing things, and like generally just like steering the ship, fast and oftentimes, taking sharp corners, things like that. And they're just incredible. It's not even like they're like even close to falling off. It's just like, I don't know, maybe it's like a pit stop team that can just like, they just, yeah, the quality of the 3 of us combined and the way that we complement each other is just something extraordinarily special and something that just, it feels like a complete blessing for me. As I think it backwards, it's like Distracted Dev and I first came into contact through Loot Survivor, right? We were both working adjacent to Biblio, and Loaf had reached out to me and was like, hey, I had finished up some other work I was doing with like Loot and Genesis Project. And he was like, hey, well, if you're free, we would love to have you do some work on like a loot adventure module, something like that. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. Like I was already learning Cairo and generally interested and headed that direction. So I was like, this would be great. And then I was like, started working in that space. And then Distracted Dev was doing some other work already in Cairo. And Loaf sent him my way and said, hey, well, Loothero's out in the woods, by himself building this log cabin loot adventure thing. Why don't you go see if he needs help? So he shows up, and I mean, he was really like my Obi-Wan Kenobi, really, in the early days of Cairo, where like, I mean, when he showed up, it's like me and I'm building a log cabin and I'm generally cutting trees with like a hand axe. And like I'm pretty durable and pretty like, I don't know, I have a lot of grit. So I was like, yeah, it's gonna be a lot of trees to cut, but like I like cutting trees. I want to build this game. So I'm just gonna start cutting trees. And he shows up and he kind of sees how I'm cutting the trees. And he's like, man, it's gonna take a long time. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, all right, well, I brought my chainsaw and like I have a sawmill if we want to use it. So like, okay, yeah, let's do that. So he starts showing me the ropes of Cairo Zero at the time, which was an extraordinarily difficult language to program in. And, I'd say within a matter of weeks, we really started to cover ground. And then him and I just bonded through that. And it's really just like him and I just like out there building together. And Loaf would come out as well. And, Loaf's just a force as well. And, if there is an opportunity for us to get stuck, it's just like Loaf shows up and he's like, oh, wait, what's going on? Like this? Okay, hold my beer. And bam, that thing's gone. And then like we're back at it. Loaf goes back and, just relatively quickly then we really were able to put up something that at the time was just CLI. But even Loot Survivor CLI was extraordinarily fun. It was like you couldn't stop just hitting the explore button and just seeing what did I find? What did I find? So then yeah, that led, Distracted Dev and I just like bonded hard. I mean, that was like a year pretty much that we built together. And that led to Loot Survivor 1. And then Await was the most prolific Loot Survivor 1 player. So he not only collected the most beast in Loot Survivor 1, was the #1 ranked player, but he also built the #1 client. So at a certain point, everybody was playing his client because he had added so many features that went above and beyond anything we built. And then at the residency, the Cartridge Dojo residency program last year, Await was there, Distracted Dev was there, I was there, and it's the first time that we had met Await. And yeah, we knew that we needed somebody else, like just two of us alone. It was just so much to build. And we're just thinking, man, it would be great if we had 3 people. And then, yeah, Await was there. And we started working with Await there, building the early form of Summit and some of this stuff. And then, yeah, Distracted Dev and I were talking like, man, it would be amazing. Like Await's really talented. He loves Loot Survivor. What if like he joined as our third? And yeah, so we talked to Await, and I mean, literally, I was like, I asked him, I was like, man, I just in my head, I knew that there was this future where if Await joined us, it would just be the dream team. And then like all of these things would happen. I was just like, man, I hope he wants to. I know it's like in the middle of a bear market. Like no one was really bullish on Onchain games. And like we're in the middle of a bear last year. So I message him, and then, he responds. Was it really that long? Honestly, I don't know if it was instant. For me, it felt instant because I was like holding my breath. And his response was like, I was really hoping that you guys would ask. I already put in my 2 weeks notice. And I was like, wow. So it's like absolutely game on from that moment. He joined, and then, we had the 3 of us. And since then, it's just has felt like the dream team between 3 of us. So going back to your main thing, I'm like, I don't know whether it's economics or game theory or like really anything. It just feels like when the 3 of us triangulate on something, if something can pass through the 3 of us and we all 3 say, yes, this is going to be it, like this is good, it's almost always good. Like it's just, we all care so much that when it comes to like the dungeon tickets, how many should we issue per day? Right? All of these sensitive dials that we've had to set. I mean, we run simulations, right? We do all of this work, but at a certain point, you need to make an agreement on like, what is going to be the right number? Should we issue 5 million tickets a year, 1 million? There's all of these things to consider. And yeah, we just discuss it. And it's not like a typical corporate meeting where you have 90% of the people in the room really don't care. And so it's like, yeah, I'll go along with whatever you guys want. We all care so much that like, if one of us doesn't agree, even if we don't know the answer, it's like an immediately, I don't know, guys, but I don't feel it yet. So let's just wait and give me more time to think. And so by the time everybody's like, I feel good about this, we all feel really good about this. And then again, it's usually layered with like test cases, simulation, other stuff as well. So yeah, whether it's the economics, the game theory, the game design, the art, anything, it's just like, it's always this really the result of all 3 of us caring so much about this game, and everything that's involved in it. And I think, yeah, just a level of passion and obsession that is really hard to fake or hard to replicate.
That's cool. I mean, listening to you talk, I feel like I'm, watching one of those VH1 behind the music kind of documentaries. I'm getting a little teary-eyed. I will say, I have been so impressed by the people that I am meeting inside of this ecosystem. I think, the three of you, a lot of the other studios, it's just such a joy to be interacting with people who are so passionate, motivated, have such clear vision, want to make things happen. It's really like, I just feel so grateful to be in this ecosystem. I know I have to say that because I work here, but I really do actually mean it. I really do actually mean
Yeah,
it.
I don't
It's really
yeah.
cool.
I know, because, like, if anything, when it's the bull market, like, of course, everybody shows up, right? And it makes sense because there's tons of money and whatever. Like, it makes sense, but, like, when you're here in the bear, like, particularly, like, someone like I mean, like, you've been around for a while, but, like, your introduction to cartridge was definitely during the bear. So, like, you're not just like I don't know, there's, like, a different level of commitment and conviction there, and I feel it too, and, like, my feeling is ultimately that the biggest opportunity of being in the crypto space is understanding that crypto attracts the best people in the world and the worst people in the world. And the reason that you want to be here for an extended period of time is it gives you more time to filter, right? And what you need to learn how to do is find the good people and then, like, avoid the bad people. And sometimes it can be tricky, right? But if you're here long enough, it's just like it becomes very easy and you just befriend the good people and then you just meet more good people. And over time, I think we've had enough time now where a lot of us have combined and earned the respect of each other. And it's just a really special time in all of that happening because rewind a couple years ago, I don't know, it's very hard in real time to know who really is, like, here to stay and cares about this stuff and who's pretending to do it because I mean, ultimately, if you're trying to sell tokens and all of this, like, there are charlatans, right? There are personalities that are very good at lying effectively, and so it's hard in real time to figure it out. But over years now, it's like, look, I mean, like, some of the core builders that have been here the whole time, building nonstop for years, it's pretty obvious that, like, we really do care about this, and we're really not going to stop. Like, it's gonna, like, yeah. So yeah, I feel exactly the way you do, and I feel really fortunate to have been here long enough to have, like, befriended and built this network of good people that I don't know, like the Elite Skulls team, the Cartridge team, the Biblio team, the Loot team. It's like all of these people now. It's just like I don't know. It's like I feel like I have my people, and they support me. I support them, and yeah, I just think there's really great opportunities ahead
Yeah, I
for all
really
of us.
agree. Kind of coming back around to the Beast collection, I think with Beast V2, you added a lot of new functionality, a lot of dynamic stats, which I think are a really interesting idea. The way that when you earn a beast, it's not just a static sort of collectible, but actually the collectible evolves based on real gameplay. Can you talk a bit more about what it was like designing some of those newer and more advanced features, both from a product perspective, like why did you think that those were important features to add to the collection? And then also kind of from a technical perspective, what was it like implementing these dynamic features that actually require new calculations based on ongoing like on-chain transactions? And like what was it like to kind of make all that kind of come together?
Yeah, so I think it'll take me, like, I think 3 minutes to read this, but I do think it's a great setup. And this is the on-chain beast description. So if you look at, like, the marketplaces where they show the description, this is the on-chain description of the beast. And I put a lot of work into this description because it is the on-chain record of what these things are. But I think it's a really good primer to read, and so I'll read it. It's not overly long, but it will take a couple minutes to read, but I'll try to read it in a fun voice or something that makes it sound fun. So here's the description of the beast. Like, this is what me, after lots of time, if I had to describe the beast, this is the description of the beast. So the beast are a collection of digital native creatures born on chain and built for battle. With 1,243 variants across 75 species, the fixed supply of 93,225 beasts strikes a balance between abundance and scarcity. Ample supply for on-chain fun, paired with distinctive visual and non-visual traits that give the collection that give collectors endless reasons to obsess over the rich collection. Beasts carry two sets of traits: visual and combat. Visual traits make collecting exciting with shiny and animated forms that activate unique pixel-perfect effects. Each beast also features live traits, such as a built-in ranking system that places every beast between 1 and 1,243 based on its power relative to the to others of its species. Rankings automatically update with each newly minted beast until all 1,243 of that species have been collected, at which point a king beast is crowned. When collected, a beast is minted with its level and health. Combined with its type and tier, these traits define a combat profile that allow beasts to canonically battle on chain, using the same combat system that first brought them into the world. Loot Survivor. Beasts also evolve through live traits, such as the number of adventurers that they have slain. the last adventurer who defeated them, and the timestamps of those battles. These provide long term, credibly neutral building blocks for future systems of growth and leveling, intentionally omitted from the base layer to support and promote emergence. Beasts are not purchased, they are earned by worthy adventurers in the dungeons of Loot Survivor, a fully on chain game powered by verifiable randomness. The story of every beast begins not at its mint, but with the adventurer who braved the dungeon. It is the combination of decisions and chance that ultimately leads to the creation of each beast. Every step of that journey is etched onto an incorruptible and indestructible ledger, ensuring that those stories remain accessible as long as the network exists. For collectors, Beast offer a generative art collection with verifiable scarcity, issuance, and provenance. For players, Beast deliver endless and timeless opportunities for on-chain fun. Beast artwork is courtesy of the legends at Lead Skulls, Skull Salute. So that's how I would describe the Beast. And so I don't know if you have any reflections on that before I answer your questions. It's
No, I think that's actually a
okay.
great summary. I think after quite a while, you all arrived at that as the sort of this is the pitch, and I think very rightfully so. So yes, I think that does a great job at kind of summing it up. Yeah, so I guess my question is, as you were thinking about designing this collection and kind of your vision for it, so I'm curious, like to get a little bit more of a behind the scenes, like, how did you arrive at this feature as being really important versus that feature? Why did you go one way versus another? Was it like kind of a product thing? Like, I think this would be a really cool feature. Was it a technical thing? I think that this feature would be really easy or challenging to implement. What was some of the behind the scenes that led to the collection ending up the way that it did? Because I assume that there were probably various points where it could have gone one way or another, and it ended up the way that it did.
Yeah, I think the story of the Beast from the start is really uncompromising commitment to quality. And like I said, we could have done just 15, but we went for 75. That's an immense amount more pixels to lay out, right? The Elite Skulls team was into it. We wanted it. We did it. It required a lot of work to do that. And then when we look into the Beast V2, the animations end up being like a X multiplier. So if they had to do 75 pixel beast for the first one, they had to do like 450 pixel beast for the second one because you have multiple frames now. And like, I don't know, for those of you who like don't do pixel art like me, I mean, it's honestly like mind blowing to be able to even think inside these frames that when you see the animated pixel beast, it looks so smooth, like it's moving like a video, but you're doing that with discrete frames of pixels, right? Which are like blocks. And Elite Skull's team is just mind-blowingly good in that element. I mean, just kind of continuing on the commitment to quality and excellence. So when we were thinking about the V2, the main thing was like the minimum thing we could have done for the V2s is really just modernize the contracts to come up to the latest standards of ERC 721, which is like an NFT standard. And what that does is just make it easier for like marketplaces and wallets to render. Because the originals were created before standards even existed on Starknet around ERC 721s, people were still debating, should we use snake case or camel case? And there were still some wallets that wanted this snake case, which is when you use all lowercase with an underdash between names, and other ones which is wanted camel case, which is if you have like, I don't know, Warlock of Power, you'd have like a lowercase w and a capital O and P or something like that. So there was no agreement, which meant that it was like there was compatibility problems with the original where even some of wallets didn't support transferring the beast because when you call transfer from the wallet, it would call like transfer of camel case. And we implemented it snake case because at the time that's what people
Wow.
wanted. The community knew this and like, yeah, it doesn't work with Bravos. And we would talk with Bravos and we're like, hey guys, can like at the time, everyone said this was it. And they're like, yeah, well, it's not it anymore. And we're like, well, can you guys still support it? So we'd have to like go to the contract and manually transfer Beast. And it was quite a pain. So when we were thinking about Loot Survivor 2, we knew at minimum we would launch a new collection and it would at least just modernize the Beast so that it used the latest Open Zeppelin standards and it was just more compatible. So that was literally all we had to do. I mean, already Loot Survivor 2 with Death Mountain and everything that went into it was already an extraordinary lift. So it's like, well, guys, how much do we really want to do on the Beast? And like I said, the answer was everything. Like
That's so funny.
there was nothing that didn't go into what we ended up doing. So it started there. It's like, okay, we have to do this. We did it. We had the new collection up. okay, it's good. It uses the latest standards. Okay, all good. And then it's like, well, the next thing was, I mean, there's a bunch of next things, but one of them was animated. And Leet Skulls has recently started doing some animated on-chain things. Particularly Cam, one of the Leet Skulls artists, he had just released a project called Bangers on Ethereum L1, and it's this like rock band profile pic, and it's animated pixel art, and it's fully on chain. And I saw it like when he posted about it in the Leet Skulls chats, and I was like, dude, this is amazing. And he had already posted some animated Beast years ago just for fun. So when they were doing the originals, he just for fun did a few of them animated, just like soft flex, just showing how good he is with the pixels. And so I was like, Cam, what's the work involved with doing a full animated set? And the response was a lot, man. Like think about like I think his Bangers project was like 20. And I think they were just 2 frames each. I don't know. I could get that number wrong. It was a fairly small set and it's like 2 frames per inch. I'm asking, okay, 75 and maybe like, I don't know, 2 to 5 frames. It's like, yo, Loothero, that's a ton of work. And I'm like, I know. And he's like, what's the timeline? And I'm like, man, we really want to release this thing like soon, like a couple weeks. And it's like, yeah, that's ridiculous. Like, there's no way. And I'm just like, okay, let me go back to the team. So I talked to Distracted and Wait. I'm like, well, if we push back the launch, then we could potentially have an animated set and we could have an animated trait and all of this. And so then it's like, okay, we all decide it's going to be so fun. I start showing the other, like the animated ones that have been done. And we're all like, man, this would be so awesome on chain. So that happens. And then it's like, okay, well, what about this shiny thing, right? Could we have a shiny trait? And like, if we can animate, we could do this. And it just keeps going. And I mean, ultimately what you see is we didn't say no to anything and it just kept going. The live dungeon stats, right? This idea that like, well, what if the beast could continue to know every time they kill an adventurer or are killed? Right? How much work would that take? And in that case, it's a lot of work on a wait. Like he was doing a lot of the dungeon contracts. So I pitched this to him and kind of like Leet Skulls, his answer is like, well, yeah, Loot Hero, we could do that, but like, it's definitely non-trivial. Like this is a lot, especially to do it in the way that he did it, which was that technically anybody can launch their own collectibles and kind of do what we're doing. Like we didn't do it as a one-off. We did it in a way that anybody could reuse the whole stack. And yeah, we did it. So we have all the live dungeon stats, right? So every single thing that was like, man, wouldn't it be amazing? We ultimately decided that like, let's do it. And when you look at total how much we had to delay, it didn't end up actually being that much because once we get into it, everybody just loves this stuff. So the elite team was just grinding on the pixels and they're just like putting these things out. And like, even like the day of deploying the beast, I'm deploying the final production print ready set. So what I do is I deploy them on mainnet with terminal blocks. So they go up on mainnet, but they have a terminal block where the contract like self implodes in 2 hours. So I put them all up there. We sanity check everything solid, but then I give them to Leet Skulls. I say, I minted one of everything. So there's 4 of each piece. There's like the regular Warlock, the shiny Warlock, the animated Warlock, and the shiny Warlock. So I deploy them. I mint 4 of each variants. So you have the 300 total unique ones up there with varied stats, all of that. And then I tell them, here's the print ready. Do you see anything missing? They found probably in total 50 individual, it might even be more. It could be like maybe 100 pixels, individual pixels where they're like, oh, Loothero, I need to send you an update to this animation because there's 1 pixel missing in the tail movement of the Amit. I'm like, what? I'm staring at the Amit. I'm staring at the animation, like, where's the missing pixel? I mean, we're talking individual pixels. And I mean, once they send it, you see them side by side and you're like, oh, damn, there's actually a missing pixel. I wouldn't have been able to spot a single one of these in a million years. And so, I mean, they're literally going through each single one, frame by frame, looking at every single one. And yeah, probably a total of, I don't know, maybe 30, probably updates, maybe even more, all things considered. And like within 48 hours of the official launch, they are just combing through every single thing, pixel by pixel. Same thing on the contract side, right? All of this. So, yeah, ultimately, it's just a uncompromising commitment to just trying to make the most based, epic on-chain collection that's ever existed. And yeah, what you see, I hope, yeah, I think the reality matches that description. The more people dig into them, the more it's like, man, they really did not compromise on anything. It's just so over the top. But it is ultimately the main primary export of the game, right? People go in the dungeon to collect the beast. In the original model, you had two reasons to go in. One was to get the best score. It was like an arcade leaderboard. And then you also had the collectible beast. As part of our embeddable game and like embeddable game architecture, we've really separated those two value propositions. So we have Bodacon now for on-chain tournaments, and we can have seasons, exclusive tournaments. We can have any leaderboards we want. Leaderboards we can create for whatever time period with whatever prizes we want. But it's good to separate the value propositions because it allows the autonomous pricing system, like the ticketing system, it gives it very clear view of what people are paying for. They're just paying to go into the dungeon to collect the beast. Now, there's a survivor token right now, but the survivor token is really part of that because it's just broad distribution of the ticketing proceeds, right? We've always done that in Loot Survivor where it's an arcade, some tokens go in, and then we try to distribute those tokens back across the community. The survivor token buyback system is really just the most efficient way to do that. So while right now there's also this incentive to go in to get the survivor tokens, we really have to do that. We need this token for this broad distribution of the economy. And then we have to issue those in a credibly neutral way. So we did a big airdrop. Now we have a huge supply in the dungeon. And before, you had to be the best in the world to get one of the top 3 spots to earn any type of the rewards. The Loot Survivor 2 is nice because you can just go in there and get a decent score and still get some of these tokens, which kind of represent that economic access to the game, economic interest or economic coordination token, as the lawyers advise us to that terminology. But fundamentally, it's just like a stake in the ecosystem. And so, I think that rounds it off pretty nicely. And the headline there is that the beasts are very important as collectibles. And ultimately, if we went really cheap on their production, then really what we would be doing is saying that, what, the reason you want these is pure utility, right? Because it's like off-chain art, right? It's like, it's just like we didn't put much effort into the actual NFTs because the value will come in the future from this game. We didn't want to do that at all. We really want people to see these and appreciate these and love to collect these for what they are right now. We will build Savage Summit. We will build more fun onto them because we love the beast and they're built to battle. So we want them to battle. But ultimately, we wanted to deliver a product that was finished. And it's not something where you're just collecting this thing just for this future utility, because it's really the start of the Ponzi. It's like, well, what's the future utility? You collect token A so you can get token B and then you can get token C. It's like, it's nonsense. So really the escape hatch is to come out of the gate just with something that can stand on its own now and in the long term as a collectible. And if you want to do that, you need to create something that's extraordinary. And the amount of time and obsession that we've put into it at every level is certainly extraordinary.
That's really amazing. I mean, I'm curious, are you able to talk a bit more about the implementation of the dynamic stats? I think in particular, that's a really interesting feature of the collection. I mean, are you able to speak to kind of what it was like for a way to actually implement some of that functionality and the challenges that had to be overcome?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the best place to start because we really did a good job with the architecture of that, and like I said, has positioned it so that any other dungeon on Death Mountain has their own storage of collectible stats and all of that. So if you create your own dungeon, right, Kronos dungeon, maybe you have different artwork, you have whatever you want. You can even have different names for the beasts, right? All of that. Well, so you say you also feature our beasts, so you just use our names, and it's still a Blood Shadow Warlock. Well, if the Blood Shadow Warlock kills an adventurer in your dungeon, it doesn't update the beast NFTs because it's namespaced, it's scoped based on the actual dungeon. But each dungeon gets this storage automatically. So what happens when you go to claim a beast is the beast contract has a claim. And anybody can claim a beast for any adventure as long as it's defeated it, and it will mint the beast to that adventure. So if we had this bug early on where sometimes you would go to claim and it would say invalid, and you'd be like, oh, I can't claim it. Where did it go? And then we'd always claim it for everybody. And that wasn't because we had an owner key. It's just because there's an open endpoint that anybody can call. And when you call this, what it does is it checks in with the Death Mountain beast system that's responsible for keeping track of all of the battles and defeats and things like that. And it says, hey, this adventurer is saying that it defeated the Blood Shadow Warlock. Specifically, it's saying that it's the first person to ever defeat the Blood Shadow Warlock. And it has this storage that's dedicated for that. And it'll return, yes, it actually did defeat that. So you now can get that Warlock or that Blood Shadow Warlock, and it'll mint them to that adventure. But like I said, one, it's dungeon to dungeon. So when the beast calls that, it's asking specifically inside the beast mode dungeon, did it happen? Now, someone else could have some other collectible and they could have a different dungeon where something else happens and they could check in with that. I mean, they can check in when stuff happens in our dungeon too, but we're just looking at our dungeon. But from a storage architecture, every dungeon maintains all of this metadata for all the battle results for the named beast, where the name beast, like I said, will be expandable, all of these things. And so from there, then, that's like the basic mint. That's the birth of a beast. You make this call and you say that adventure ID 5 defeated the Blood Shadow Jaguar. And then it's going to check in with Death Mountain, say, did this happen in this dungeon? Yes, it did. Here's the beast that's minted. But then if the Blood Shadow appears again and say somebody else kills it, it will then add an additional record. You still know the first person to defeat it was Adventure 5, but say Adventure 10 also then defeats it. There's then another storage slot. There's like a kill count. So it knows the total amount of adventurers that have killed the Blood Shadow Jaguar. And each of those are an index into the storage to the adventure, which means it has the full details of the adventure, not just like killed 2. No, it knows the name, it knows the level, it knows everything about the adventure that killed the Blood Shadow Jaguar, every single one of them in that dungeon. And it works in the other direction as well. Every time the Blood Shadow Jaguar kills an adventure, it increments a kill count, which appears in the metadata of the beast. And then each of those kill counts is an index to look up the exact details of the adventure. So in the description of the beast, I'm laying out this structure where that can become very useful is if you have a game like Summit, you may have some base way to gain XP in your game where you're building on top of the beast. What this is nice is it's like an organic source of extra bonuses flowing in, where every time your Blood Shadow Warlock kills somebody in the dungeon, the kill count goes up. So it's like, okay, you killed somebody, maybe you get 5 XP. But it's even better because we know exactly how high the level of the adventure is that you killed. So it probably shouldn't be the same. If you took down a level 40, if you ended a legendary run on level 45, you should probably get more XP for your beast than if you defeated a level 1. And it also makes it harder to gain because say this other game like Summit is taking off, people love it, and it's getting competitive. You can't just like play Loot Survivor and come across your beast. I mean, for one, it's hard to come across your beast because there's so many of them. But even if you did, if you just like let it kill you and you're on level 5, it's just not going to be that meaningful. Meanwhile, if you're on level 40, are you really going to let that, you're going to let your own beast kill you? The reward would have to be a lot. So yeah, that's kind of the package here is that I'll play that backwards is every time the Blood Shadow, I know I've been mixing Blood Shadow Jaguar and Blood Shadow Warlock. Blood Shadow Jaguar is like one of my favorites. I don't know if somebody's gotten it yet, but it's killed me multiple times over the years. And I have this thing where I'm going to eventually collect it. I need to look if somebody's gotten it yet. But the Blood Shadow Warlock, Jaguar is one I refer to often, but I know I've been using Blood Shadow Warlock. But every time the Blood Shadow Jaguar kills somebody, that is, it gets a kill count, but it also is an index into the specific adventure ID with all the details that it killed. So it has the full details of all of that. Other direction, every time it's killed, it does the same thing. So it knows how many times it's died, and it has a list of all the adventurers that have killed it, and it has like a last death timestamp, which can also be used for like power-ups. If your beast hasn't been defeated in the Loot Survivor dungeon for 2 weeks, you activate this boost. And then, dang it, somebody defeated mine yesterday, and now I lost my boost, that kind of thing. And then lastly, it's all scoped per dungeon. So when you go in like the beast mode dungeon of Death Mountain, which I recognize we haven't unbundled that yet, so people are just thinking about beast mode and Loot Survivor 2 and Death Mountain all in the one. But the whole structure is set up that there can be multiple dungeons, and all of this storage is scoped based on the dungeon so that you can have multiple different dungeons with this information available on a per dungeon basis.
Right on. I mean, I think one of the things about the beast collection that I found the most intriguing was the idea that you could have a powerful beast that would keep kind of doing work for you by killing other adventurers. And so you could have this beast collectible that as time passes is just racking up more and more KOs. And that's something that is like your dude is just like savaging all of these adventurers, and
Yes.
that's something that you just get to see. I thought that was so neat when I first heard
It's
about it.
good. Yeah, because there's like 2 dimensions. There's the king beast, right, which is just the highest level of a particular beast. So if you have the highest level warlock, then what you'll see on your NFT is like a gold crown, which represents you have the highest. Somebody in the future could collect one higher, and then that would be 1, and then you'd move down to 2. But eventually, like once all 1,243 warlocks are collected, it's now locked in stone. Like it's now set in stone. So if you have the King Warlock, guess what? You've done it. You literally own the number one most powerful Warlock. And that's just an exciting thing from like a collectible rarity perspective. Like I think that's a fun collectible thing and it's dynamic over time. So say somebody listed their King Warlock today, you kind of know there's like a risk. Like you buy it, you're like, dang, I hope it holds. But then maybe in the future, somebody else gets a higher one. You're like, dang it, now it's a number two, which is probably less, maybe going to be less valuable from a collectible perspective long term. But this other dimension of this kill count is kind of interesting, right? Because it's like another dimension, like, well, you have the number one most powerful, but my beast has killed the most, right? Which is cool. But that is also like it never ends essentially. So you can have the most today, but then maybe over time. So our goal with Summit is to really provide like a set of really good takes on how to use this to gamify it. And so the one that Await and I are arriving on as of like Friday, and it's kind of like the Beast. There's Summit, there's like Advanced Summit, and then there's like, okay, that seems ridiculous, but we're probably going to do it Summit. We're thinking about, what we want to use the kill count for is like a stat upgrade. So like the basic version would be every time it kills, you get some XP based on the level of adventure. That's like the base, right? And like we're definitely going to do that. The one that we talked about would be like really fun to do. It's just like a lot more work, but like we love what we do, so we'll probably do it, which is like this concept of like, having different stats for your beast and your kill count is how you get a stat upgrade. So you can imagine arriving to Summit and it's like, say you have like 50 beasts and it's like, collectively your beasts have killed this many. And then you kind of like those beasts light up and you get to apply an upgrade. And there's some storage implications here because that is persistent. And we feel strongly that we need to keep the beast attack maximally simple because we want to paymaster the whole thing. So we need the cost to attack the summit to be maximally cheap, which means one storage update. So we only have 251 bits for the beast stats, all of this. And we have that today, but we don't have a lot of bits to spare. So for us, it kind of adds up to maybe something as simple as 2 bits. So it means really 3, you have 3 levels. And say one of them is something like a revival speed. And you start with 24-hour revival. You attack the summit, you die. In 24 hours, you can attack again for free. But if you upgrade this revival, then it chops off 8 hours. Right? I'm just using estimates here. Like we got to tune this stuff. But in general, if you elected to invest that kill into that stat, then now you can revive every 16 hours, something like that. Probably 6 hours or something like that. And then there would be other ones though, right? So there'd be 3 other ones. They only require 2 bits each of storage. So we only need 6 bits to do this. And it's like super fun. Like you get there and it's like you get to invest this stat in these 3 things where in general, it's not going to be like over the top complexity. Like, it might be like, okay, you should definitely do the revival, right? Like the hardcore players are like, they figure out the meta and it's like, okay, but still you can only do that for 3. So once you've done that 3, now you have to decide the next one. And you still are relying on your beast killing people in the dungeon. But it could be enough of an incentive that you're playing Loot Survivor and you come across your beast on an early level and you're like, you know what? I am willing to sacrifice this game to get a stat upgrade for my like high powered warlock. And we want that. Like we want it to almost be like if you were just watching Loot Survivor games, once Summon is out, you start to see things where you're like, why the heck did they do that? Like they clearly couldn't beat the beast and they just like sacrifice. Like there would be no rational explanation for it other than your knowledge of Summit. And that's really what we're trying to incentivize, not in like a financial speculation, like nothing like that, just like in a pure fun and just adding to the overall dimensions of what Loot Survivor 2 is. And like, yes, you're trying to collect more beast, but you also have this other game where you're trying to take the summit. And in our previous playtest of Summit, I mean, it's so easy to obsess over Summit. I mean, the first thought I had when I played it, I remember the day that Await and I first, it was the weekend of Dojo residency. We started the game jam. Distracted was out of town that weekend. I was up there. Like sometimes I would go home to see my family. I was there that weekend. I had nothing to do. Await was there. I'm like, hey, you just want to meet up at the WeWork and just grind on this thing and just get this thing out? And he's like, yeah. And we went straight to mainnet that day. We put something on mainnet. We messaged the Beast community, or the Survivor community, like, hey, if you guys want to play this game. And like, I just remember thinking, I don't have enough beasts right now. And I've never been able to collect as many beasts because, I'm like, since the Survivor 1 days, I've been building most of the time. So it's hard for me to like take the time to play and collect. So I've always been like weaker than everybody else. And I just remember really feeling for the first time that like, guys, I really need more beasts right now. This feels pathetic. Later on that night, I was sitting with Fortuna from Underwear. I was, living with him and we're sitting across the table. And I'm like, hey, you want to go head to head on Summit? And he's like, sure. And I didn't know how many beasts he'd already acquired. It had only been a few weeks into Loot Survivor 1.5, and he was a new player. And I was like, okay, so I take it with like a T5, something low powered. He takes it, I take it. And we're like one upping each other. We're sitting across the table and we're going back and forth. And then like I start to get to my more powerful ones. And I'm thinking like, okay, like time to turn it up a notch. And I have like some 200 power ones. And I take it and he just like headshots it, whacks it off. And I'm like, okay, I didn't expect that. And the thing is, you have elemental, right? So as long as he has a mixture of types, he can generally hit you hard, just like in Loot Survivor. And I mean, I was out, right? So I was like getting to the end of my stack and I was out of beast. And I'm like, damn, he got me. And then I'm like, okay, what do you have left? So I walk over to his side of the table. He still had like 80
That's
beasts
so
left.
funny.
And I was like, no. I was like, I just felt panic. I was like, oh no, this is not good. So yeah, it's going to be special, I think, for people that are collecting to see that and play that. And like, since then, I don't know, a lot of us we already love Summit. And that's why we're so excited to launch this like now. Like we want to launch the alpha now because we know that people are going to love it. And like, there's going to be like improvements. We're going to iterate on this for the next 3 to 5 weeks or something. And we have the DeFi system. There's so much that's going to go into this. But in general, when you think about this whole thing lining up and the kill counts, it's just going to make it really clear to people why these beasts are so fun. But I'll cap that off with like throwing a little water on the fire, which is that I don't want people to get carried away with the functionality, with just like pure utility of these, because like I said, it ultimately kind of leads to a Ponzi that we're not willing to participate in. And in this case, what we've designed Summit for now is we've reserved 1% of the supply of Survivor very intentionally because like we don't want to have to release a new token or something new. It's like, well, why do I want the Summit? Well, we got this new token. What does that token do? It's like, okay, we have 1% of the supply of Survivor. All the in-game purchases goes to Survivor buyback. So there's like a natural thing here where like you can do the math of like, well, I could spend $2 and buy these potions and take it and then get like 20 Survivor, and that's about that. It's never going to be perfect. Like you shouldn't be able to gain money. Like that's when like things aren't working. Like that was the case for Loot Survivor 2 tickets for a little bit. The market was allowing this triage where you could pay 20 Survivor tickets and then get 40 for playing. But the nice part about having everything free floating is the market will just close that. Like it won't exist for long as the players arbitrage. So this would kind of be the same. And so you'll play to get a stream of 1%. We won't space that out for a long time. It'll be like a month to 3 months. So it'll be a meaningful amount of Survivor coming out of the Summit. And when you're up top, bam, you're like getting this stream. And then it'll have an end. And when it ends, the game will generally end. And the other value of doing it, though, is upgrading your beast, is that you'll lock in these Summit stats where you've gained extra XP levels, you've gained extra health from feeding your dead adventures, you've done all of these things, and it's only available for a limited amount of time. Now, when Provable Labs looks to the future of like things like Loot Survivor RPG, like we're not done. We're going to keep building. So long as like we can afford to like keep our computers powered and do these basic things, we're going to keep building. When we do future things on the beast, we are absolutely going to use the Summit stats. So Summit takes the base stats and then it adds extra stats. Someone else building on beast, they could say, you know what, I don't, they're going to choose to use the base stats. So you're not on level 50, you're on level 30, which is your NFT. Like those are locked. But we can respect that. What we're going to broadcast to the community is we think Summit is good. We think it's balanced. And ultimately it's rewarding beyond just like economics. Just simply attacking every day will give you some level ups and you can upgrade. Like, so completely free of charge, you can play Summit and have fun and level up your beast for this period of time for 3 months. But once all the Survivor tokens have been issued, combined with that will be the game stops playing and you can no longer attack the Summit. And there'll be some like final Summit beasts, which will be fun. People at the very end trying to like take it and be on the Summit at the end, but that'll generally be the end of the game. And I think us being very clear and transparent about that just helps not allow the Ponzi to start, right? Where people are just buying these beasts because there's this other game and this other game. Again, there will be more games. We love these beasts, but ultimately it comes down to like tokens and rewards and all of this. And we're not really keen to just infinitely create tokens after tokens in utility. So yeah, that's just like a little splash of water on it that we think people are absolutely going to love it. It's going to be fun. There will be an incentive, which is the Survivor. But once that is over, it's kind of like, well, now what do I do with the beast? And that's where like, again, if you're collecting, focus on like, do the time. If you're going to be a serious collector, do the time to like listen to this podcast, look up the source code, right? Like look at the stuff we're publishing and make an educated opinion on yourself. Is this actually an extraordinary, exceptional, on-chain native collection. And I'm confident that everybody will arrive at yes. Like even the most deep crypto natives, and that's really what we're seeing, is people like that are very long-term, deep-rooted crypto people starting to dig into this thing. And they're like, they cooked. This thing is extraordinary, which means it has some non-zero chance of being relevant 5 years, 10 years. And I mean, that's ultimately how I think any on-chain game is really going to have lasting power is by birthing a durable collectible. You know, people don't buy first edition Charizards to battle with them in Pokemon. They buy them as a collectible. And in order for a collectible to have value, it needs to have certain properties. It needs like legitimacy, authenticity. It needs some kind of like issuance. Like it needs all of these things that add up to people wanting to own this. And part of that is people knowing about it and caring about it. And that's really the work we're doing now with the game, with Summit, just making people like have an emotional affinity to this collection and want to collect more and trade with their friends and all of these things. So yeah, like I said, just a little douse of fire on it because I just think it's important. I think that trying to build here for the long term is very hard because you can get people in the community that have different expectations about the value of these things long term. And then, yeah, they experience financial loss and then there's grief. And then that becomes like toxic for the community. So we've always been quite transparent and explicit about statements like this to try to prevent that because we do want people to be able to follow us now, next year, 5 years. Like we want to build a lasting brand here. And yeah, people being financially irresponsible and losing money is not the recipe to do that. But I do think it takes founders saying things like I'm saying to throw water on the fire and not just let people get out of control. Even though token prices going up are fun and exciting, sure, but it needs to be balanced and sustainable.
Really well said. We've been talking for quite a while, Luke. This has been awesome. Anything else you want to say or talk about before we kind of wrap this conversation up?
Yeah, I'll just add a little bit. I'll just sprinkle in a little bit more lore at the end, which is the original deployment of the beast. And so, like I said, first thing is they're spread across 5 contracts. So there's no way to deploy them in one contract, not 2 contracts, not 3, not 4. It takes 5 contracts on Starknet to get these things on there. But then above and beyond that, just minting a beast is so computationally heavy that there was a limit to how many we could even fit inside an entire Starknet block, which once they started minting, once we started airdropping them to the V1s, because of the ranking system, where if a warlock appears, it has to update all of the other warlocks, because of like the dynamic ranking system and all of that, it ended up being that towards the end of the airdrop, the most beasts that we could fit in an entire Starknet block was like 15 beasts. That
Right.
if
I remember this. I remember in the Telegram being like, he was like,
yeah,
you were talking directly to Starkware
yeah,
and they were like, you're like, what's going on here? I remember that. That was funny.
yeah, they're like, well, first of all, it's way too many storage updates, right? So like you couldn't even do this just with storage updates. Even if we raise the storage update limits, you would still exceed the maximum gas of an entire Starknet block. So like you're just breaking all of these limits. Like it's not even just one, it's all of them. So
Right.
I mean,
Because I guess you'd have to update the ranking of every other beast. So it'd be like, 1,000 potentially storage updates in one transaction. And that's the issue.
exactly, exactly. And it's like lore like that, but then also a little bit like last minute technical things that are quite significant in terms of like technical complexities is one limit Starknet has is around events and how many events you can emit. And so there's this Ethereum standard where when your NFT changes, you can emit this metadata update. And that'll tell any of the indexers following your collection that, hey, something about this NFT has changed. So you need to call a token URI to get a fresh copy. Now, if it's like a purely static collection like CryptoPunks, you never have to do this. You can just do it one time and it's always going to be the same today and forever. If it's changing, then what you should do is emit this event and tell it when it changes. So the beasts do that, and they do that very intentionally. They never emit this event unless they've actually changed. But if you have say there's 500 warlocks and a new first place one is emitted, well, they all need to emit that because they've all changed their rank. They've all moved down one. And so that's the most expensive one. If your beast kills somebody in the dungeon, it's just you that needs to update, not everybody. But if it's a new rank that bumps everybody down, they all need to. The reason I mentioned the 1K event limit is because there's 1,243 beasts. So if you have a new rank 1, the contract would try to emit 1,243 and it would hit the event error and it would just fail, which would prevent that beast from even being minted. So this would actually brick minting completely. That once the beast got over 1,000, anybody trying to collect something that's above a certain rank would not be able to, period. The contract would break. So what we had to do is build in a pagination system into the event emitter, where what it does is it checks to see how many are being changed, and then it'll emit the top like 650 events. So it makes sure that immediately the top 160 ranks are correct, and then it leaves a bookmarker in the contract that anybody can then call. It's open, and as long as anybody calls this, it'll update the next 650 to keep the full set. But stuff like that is, pretty technical. And if you don't know about those limits, then it might have been a gotcha that like, you test this, it looks good. You minted 10, 100, it looks good. And then you get to 1,000, it's like, okay, the thing is bricked. So yeah, there's certain optimizations like that as well and configurations we had to be aware of. But going back to the initial airdrop on them, I mean, it was pretty comical. I mean, we were stumped. When we did the initial airdrop, we calculated that we could do 333. And so we did 300 and it worked. We were like, great. We didn't fully appreciate the compounding gains of doing additional and the reordering of those original 300 when we
Right.
did the next set. And there were some complications around routing the error messages back to us. So we were getting a response that was like, all good, airdrop complete. And then we got this transaction hash. And then when we asked anybody about the transaction hash, everybody's like, we have no idea anything about this transaction. We've never heard of that transaction. We're like, what? So we like couldn't do it. It was just failing for unknown reasons. And that's when we reached out to Starkware. We started going through all this advanced debugging and we figured that out. But it was comical that towards the end, it really was such that we could only airdrop around 10 to 15 at a time. Now, doing one at a time, we know works. And we knew that long term, there's not going to be 15 beasts collected at a time. Even if
Right.
you have a game where you collect 15, you still are only minting one. And we know that that one can always fit within the limits where events becomes the primary. It's just when like we're airdropping 10
Yeah,
and
of
it's
course.
displacing 10 different leaderboards that you have a 10x multiplier on that. So yeah, just some fun lore that yeah, the beasts are so it's not just that there's 5 contracts to like carry the load of all the on-chain pixel art, animations, shinies, the on-chain font, all of this. It's even just like the actual work of minting one is so significant. Um, and yeah, just very lastly, then, if that were ongoing costs, we wouldn't do it. But because it's just a one time thing to bring them into the world,
Right.
everything after that is mostly free because emitting events is mostly free. It's not expensive. There's no significant storage or something like that. So we can emit like those events pretty cheaply. And so it's not like you transferring a beast is going to cost you $5. No, transferring beast is the same cost as transferring any NFT. So we get all of this like, yeah, we get this very rich NFT without like it's heavy to bring into the world, but it's a one-time cost. And after that, the community can trade swap these and they're very, very efficient for like day-to-day combat, trading, all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, something we talk about often how it's always gaming that is pushing the technology frontier at any ecosystem because, gamer expectations around performance are always further ahead of the pack. And so, the work that occurs in gaming ecosystems ultimately does advance, whatever sort of technology world you're operating in. And so I think
It's so true.
we're getting a really clear
Yeah.
example of that right here. Yeah, I mean, I think also
We talk
yeah,
we
yeah. Also to your
yeah.
credit, I think this was happening like a few weeks after the big Starknet 14 upgrade, and so I think a lot of things were changing on the network side as well that you were having to navigate. So I think to your credit,
Yeah.
there was a lot going on at that time.
Yeah, we had the decentralized sequencers and it just, there's a distributed mempool. So it's not you can send a transaction to one node, it drops it, and then it gives you a transaction hash. But if you go ask anybody else, any other node about that, they've never heard of it because it was just one node that knows about it, not everybody. So yeah, there was
Yeah.
some there was a lot there that was hard to see, but man, I'm so pleased with the 14 upgrade. The pre-confirmations. I'm hoping they can get even faster, but still, on average, before it was like 6 to 8 seconds per transaction. A lot of times when you click that explore button, it can be much faster than 6 seconds, right? I'm
Yeah,
hoping
really.
over time we can get to 250 milliseconds, which I think was the original, like that was the intent. I think
Hmm.
the latest spec I saw is like 500 milliseconds. We're not seeing that reliably yet, but I'm confident that over time we're going to trend towards that. And that's just going to feel really smooth from a game experience to be able to click explore and it's less than a second. There's your result. Click, 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 click. It's going to feel so, so good. So overall, yeah, kudos to Starkware for landing that version 0.14, both decentralizing the sequencer, which is a big step towards like the overall resilience and decentralization of the network, but then also like big features like UX features like the pre-comps, just incredible. Yeah, just continue to be so happy with building on Starknet, building alongside Cartridge, just this cohort we have. Yeah, never been more bullish.
That's awesome. Well, Loothero, it's been great talking to you. I look forward to seeing what happens next with the ecosystem, the Beast, Loot Survivor 2. And yeah, let's all keep working. Let's all keep building.
All right. Thanks for having me. Bye, Daniel.
All right. See ya.